Yes. Thank you. That's good.
Thank you, Jan and Pat. Whoa. So welcome everybody. It is good to see so many of you here in person, and welcome also to those of you who are joining us virtually. I can't say welcome on this gorgeous spring day, 'cause it ain't, but it's a good day to be here. Put it the other way, it's a good day to be inside. It's a good day to be together. Welcome to Westside Unitarian Universalist Church. We are a church which welcomes everybody with respect to race, gender, theological orientation. And if you want to be with us and you join us in our dedication to caring for each other and the world, welcome, welcome. I'm Suzanne Molnar. I'm a member of the worship committee, and I'm the worship associate today for the service. Some problems with love, and do I have any idea what he's going to say? No. So we will see. There are announcements, quite a few of them, in your order of service or scrolling on your screen. And please note, I'm not going to read the ones that are recurring, of which there are quite a few. I want to call attention in particular to the fact that on Saturday, we'll be having a celebration of the life of Janet Atkins. 12 o'clock, to be followed with a potluck. So we bring food. Yes. And
Last I heard was it's catered.
oh yeah? I don't think so, unless you're, setting that up, Judy. You've heard? Well, no.
Okay.
This is do-it-yourself, although Chris has planned to bring cucumber sandwiches and a friend who's going to be a sausage roll. Anyway, there will be some ethnically authentic stuff, but we're responsible for the rest, so come and celebrate with us that way. And there's another announcement, and this one is new in the order of service. So Yetta, will you come and explain it, please?
Thank you. So the Green Sanctuary Committee is sponsoring a visit to Knoxville. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a business downtown that allows you to reduce your plastic use by bringing containers and purchasing things like cleaners and such. So this is in here. And afterwards, we will go to a restaurant, 71 South, which is a really nice restaurant in a converted church that we've been to before. So please let either me or Ellen Greenwood know if you're interested in coming. We will meet at 3 o'clock after the potluck that was just discussed earlier.
Reminder of everybody, we do not pass the plate anymore. Instead, we ask you to support us. There's boxes in the back to supporting us and/or our partner, which is the bottom. We do a share the wealth partner new every quarter. This quarter, it's the bottom. And next Sunday, there will be a staff member from the bottom here to talk with us, to update us on what's there. So I think that's it, unless somebody else has an announcement that I don't know about. Okay? So now, I'll ask David to invite the bowl to sound.
Are you going to sit down?
Oh, sorry.
As Reverend Bordeaux always does, to say this is the time to settle in, take a deep breath, just relax, get your minds in gear and your hearts in gear, and listen.
And I'm inviting Mike Chapin to come up and light our chalice for us. And then after I've done a brief reading, to light the community candles. People who've been here a while have probably heard me read this before. but today it just seemed really appropriate for the service looking at love. It's Albert Schweitzer. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. And our community candles, one for concerns, one for celebration. Concern, there's so many people whose lives, careers have been thrown into uncertainty. Suddenly, without warning. It must be a really dreadful thing for them. Celebration, I've read, it started in Canada, but is spreading in the US also. People learning that big solar farms can be used also to graze sheep. And it's a nice piece of symbiosis. The sheep keep the grass cut under all the solar panels. The solar panels give a bit of shade if the sheep are looking for that. And of course, the sheep provide a little fertilizer to the grass, and the fencing that's always put around solar farms holds the sheep in too. So, nice symbiosis.
What a nice example of things working together. Be nice if that always worked that way, but of course it doesn't. Well, happy Thanksgiving week. That's another nice example of love working well. And happy Thanksgiving Day. I'm sorry, Valentine's Day. I hope yours was as good as mine was. It is a nice day and a nice celebration of the year. The title of this talk that I've been thinking about for a month or so is Some Problems with Love. And there are so many different kinds of problems. The ones that might occur to you first are the psychological problems. Staying motivated in the right way, dealing with anger, dealing with just loss of feeling, dealing with differences of ways in which we appreciate each other. That's not really what I'm going to talk about, though Suzanne, she's the psychologist in the family, might want to give a sermon on that at some other time. I'm a philosopher, and so I think about the problems that are involved in the notion of love itself. And Valentine's Day and Valentine's Week is a good way of bringing that up, because that's a kind of love that at least in many ways is pretty clear. We know what's going on. We don't always live up to it, but we know what we're supposed to be doing. And the problem is more a problem of simply how you get yourself to do what you would know that you would be better off doing. The problems with love that I think about and concern me and concern us as a community in which, as it says, if you'll turn to the back of your order of service, love is the power that holds us together and at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values, the spiritual discipline of love. that's something that seems to me to be something that could work. I was, as the phrase goes, unchurched for about a half a century. And then I came to this particular place and found that this was a place that I was happy to be, a place in which the community was one that I was comfortable as part of, because the kinds of things that I found disagreements with are things that could be settled in the ways that we, as you say, we're supposed to, with freedom, reason, hope, courage. And unlike the church that I went to as a child and as a teenager, it was very clear that God was the center of everything. What our doctrine, sorry about that, I know we're not supposed to have a doctrine, our doctrine says that love is the center, because different people have different ideas about what God may be, and some of us don't have a God in our lives at all, but love is still available there as a center. The question is, what kind of love? I wanted to talk about it with respect to Valentine's Day and Valentine's Week, because there, that matter is relatively clear. We know what familial love is. We know what partnership love is. As I said, we don't always live up to it because of a variety of psychological problems, but mostly we know what it is that we're supposed to do. We know the ways in which love can draw us together. But familial love, partnership love, is not the kind of love that I can imagine is one that can work with the entire world. Love is supposed to be the center of life for us as a community, supposed to be the center of life as we are supposed to live it, because it's something that draws us together, something that we agree upon. Even within a family, if you think about it at all, you realize that the love of parents for children is quite different than the love of children for parents. How could it be otherwise? Children, particularly when they're very small, are in a deep need of what the parents have to give. And parents recognize that somehow they have to respond to this need, and their needs are different. And life goes on there as we expect it to. Love of siblings is different than the love of parents and children and parents. And that's just within the family, which is a pretty straightforward matter. But if we're going to talk about love as the center of life, as you do, then we have to talk about a kind of love that is applicable everywhere. And that's where I wonder not how to do it, but what to do. So I look at this and I say, well, what does it say in our official position? We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. Culture, yeah, I can deal with culture. Personal experience, of course I know that my personal experience is different than other people's personal experience. And my personal experience in some sections of my life are different than my personal experience in other sections, and continue to try to learn from that. And theology. Really? Every theology, and I know that many of you have spent parts of your lives in different churches with different theologies, you know how different theology is. And if we are to be inclusive somehow, inviting everyone. Do you see what I'm after here? Of course we can get people of different races. Of course we can get people of different backgrounds, but different theologies? There we have to have a single idea of what it is that we all imagine, that we think about, that we feel, that we understand when we're all trying to talk about the love that is at the center of it. We work to be a diverse, multicultural, beloved community where all thrive. But I know from my own life that what seemed thriving when I was 15 was quite different than what was thriving when I was 35, was quite different than what was thriving when I was 65, was quite different when what was thriving when I am now in 85. Thriving depends upon where you are in the journey that you're in. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness. So one thing that we try to do is to give to others what we think is a good thing to give to them. In addition to the you love, the other thing I looked up and considered was, for many people, certainly for me, one of my favorite passages on love to be found in Christian scripture. You all know this. You have heard, love your neighbors and hate your enemy, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute. Do good to those who hate you. And you're likely to say, yeah, but that's really hard to do that. And it certainly is hard, but I think there's a different kind of hardness. Pray for those who persecute you. What are you going to pray for? Presumably you're going to pray that they will turn to the same God, the same idea of God that you have, and this God will bless them. You will pray that they will come to see the truth as it really is. But we have tried to do something different than that. We recognize that different people have different ideas about what the truth of such matters is. We have different ideas of God or an idea of love without God, which is something that we are supposed to all be able to find common ground with. If that's hard to figure out what to pray for, that is appreciative of and understanding of those who have a very different sense of what life ought to be and who they are, consider the next part of it. Do good to those who hate you. My experience has been that when I try to show someone love and do good to them, because surely that's part of it, what I think is good for them is not what they think is good for them. Anybody who has been a child, as you all have been, or a parent, as most of you have been, know full well that very often with children, you love them, you want to do good to them, and their response may be, "Why do you hate me so much?" What you are convinced is good for them is not at all what they think is good for them. One thing at least is clear. You can't simply do good for them in whatever your idea is without having to have some kind of idea of what they think is good, and knowing whether or not they can hear that at all, and whether or not you can have a response to it, and a conversation can begin. Now, if it's difficult to have that conversation take place, what I think is doing good for you and what you think is good for you, as these butt heads, instead of being the same kind of thing going on, is surely a theological problem. It's an idea not of who we think we are at the moment, but who we really are. As I listened to this service last week, and I'm simply going to take for granted that many of you were here last week, there were some really lovely passages in which I closed my eyes and just listened to the music and listened to nice things about us all living in the same world and all being part of the same world and all feeling the same thing. Except, of course, that wasn't the case. I feel comfortable, I feel apart, I feel connected at times that others do not. I think we all know what tough love is. Why is tough love tough? Because we're trying to tell somebody else that what is good for them is what they don't think is good for them. They want it in some way, and we want to give it to them in another way. And because I am, in my own way, a theologian, I think, so how might we work this out? And verbally, this is a pretty easy question to answer. All you have to do is to figure out who you really are, whether you know it or not. You see, if you can talk to someone who they really are, whether they know it or not, if you do it well enough, then they will recognize also, oh, this is who I really am. I didn't recognize it before. And sometimes that works, but sometimes it doesn't work. It's hard to watch the news without being struck. At least it's hard for me to watch the news without being struck by how different people believe what is good for them. The most striking example is the idea that what's good for me is me having power over other people. That's not my idea. But people who believe this say, if you really love me and you'll do good for me, then you'll help me have power over other people. And it's not just a psychological problem of how to go about this, it is a theological problem of what is really good for them. Now, this is not universal. Sometimes we get in a different situation and have different experiences and are with other people. And I'm reminded that's why when I started coming here, it was just so comfortable for me to be here. Oh, these are people I can talk with. And if we have different ideas about what's good for me, if we have different ideas about who I really am, then we'll talk and think and meditate and do whatever it is that we're comfortable doing, and we will find some kind of common ground. But if we don't find common ground, then I say, I love you and I want to do good for you. And the other person replies, you're not doing what's good for me. You're doing instead what I dislike, what harms me, because I know what's good for me, because I know who I am. I live in a dog-eat-dog world in which the only thing you can do is to win out in a constantly competitive way. And because I don't believe that, that's not the sort of thing I can do. If love were simply love, and that was the end of the matter, familial love, sibling love, partnership love, children's love, parents' love, friends' love, love for animals, that is something that is quite proper to a UU kind of way of looking at things. It says in our view of things, every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity. Well, that's great if the two people have the same idea of what it is to flourish. But if they have not only different ideas, but really incompatible ideas, what seems to one as being flourishing does not seem to the other. And I put in parentheses under person, every person has the right to flourish. And because we are pantheists, some of us, in our own way, or accept that as a way of being UUs, We recognize that different animals flourish in different ways. Let me just give a simple example. In the fun kind of game, the world is divided into two kinds of people. One of my favorites is the world is divided into dog people and cat people. You know what it's like to be a dog people. You have this loving animal that looks at you carefully to try and figure out what you want of them. And then if you treat them well, does it happily and does it well, that's a dog. And then you have cats who live their own life and are in some kind of agreement. Yeah, sometimes we can be convenient for each other, and then sometimes we're not, and I'll do some things for you, and you'll do some things for me, but don't give me any idea about it living some kind of joint life, because cats live a different life than human beings do. And I offer this as something silly, but consider how difficult this is when we're talking about two people, where one has a very different idea of what it means to flourish, what it means to thrive. And you try to do something loving for them, and it's what would be flourishing for you, but it doesn't feel like it's flourishing for them. How then are we possibly going to have a love which is at the center of everything, if all the different ways in which it is used are ways that work for some kinds of relationships, but not work for other kinds of relationships? I think you've got my point so far. I got this far and said, okay, time to give up. Love cannot be the center of everything. It cannot be the foundation of everything, because there are too many different kinds of love and too many different ways of thinking how you do good for others, too many different ways of how you may flourish and thrive. We need to simply give it up. And then I read one of my favorite authors who at the end of a really lovely book said, love is just love. It doesn't matter whether it's sexual, it doesn't matter whether it's parental, it doesn't matter whether it's friends, it doesn't matter whether it's companions. Love is simply love. And after reading the whole book, I was kind of convinced there is a relationship here. A relationship that does seem to somehow cover all the different ways of doing it. And I stopped to realize there was one thing that I'm sure of. As a philosopher, it is a matter of doctrine to me that I make lots of mistakes, and lots of my beliefs are false. That's about the only thing that I know that's true, is that a lot of my beliefs are false. Unfortunately, I don't know which ones are, and it's probably the ones that I'm going to have the hardest time thinking about and really seriously doubting and wondering about. But a lot of my beliefs are false. How then can I possibly have a connection? And this is a puzzle that I really now don't know what to do about, but invite you to think about yourself and think about in all the relationships that you have. If love is some kind of honest, truly effortful attempts at connections, not just to other people, but to the whole universe, certainly to other species, certainly to those that we have really strong disagreements with. If it's some kind of a connection, how can we get into a state of mind which allows us to take the differences seriously? And that's what I don't know how to do. I listen to some people who have a very different idea of what it means to pray for someone, to do good for someone, to thrive, to flourish. And somehow I have to learn how to listen to them. And listening is not just up here, Listening is here. Listening is here. Listening is putting aside what I may be at the moment convinced and say, what would it be like to really live in terms with the very different sense of who they are? And I come to this because the alternative, I know who they really are, and they don't. They don't know who they are, and somehow I have to enlighten them on who they really are so they'll know what's really good for them, as opposed to the false beliefs that they have at the moment. That path is a disastrous one, and yet the connections are still there. So as always, what I want to leave you with are questions for you to ask yourself. Think about someone who really did have different ideas to these basic connections, which are the true content of love. If love is a connection and you are in two so very different places and you want to somehow enrich the connection, how do you go about it? I bet I can say everyone here has experience of it going badly. But you can think of cases in which it went well. And it didn't go well because they realized that you were smart and they were stupid. It went well because you found some kind of way of moving on, not in some kind of vanilla compromise between the two, but some way in which you could understand that people can be different and yet still fundamentally human beings sharing life together, sharing a country together, sharing a world together, sharing all sorts of things together. In other words, be cat people, not dog people. Do I have anything left to say? I do have one thing left to say. The last thing that we'll be doing today is singing a song, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place. And just stop and look at the lyrics for a second. When our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place and we trust the wisdom in each of us, not just some of us, trust the wisdom in each of us. Every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes. How hard it is to do that. How hard it is to look at each other in that way, because we have to, at the moment, wait and see which of our ideas at the moment work and which ones don't work. When our heart is in a holy place, that's the solution, of course, for our hearts somehow to be in a holy place when those who are attempting to connect, those who are attempting to find a bond, have very different ideas of what a holy place is. So we will simply sing it together. And if the choir would like to get up.
Are y'all doing justice and generosity?
This is 1008 in the Teal hymnal. has been doing a bunch of different stuff for benediction. Sitting by ourselves, standing, holding hands, just looking at each other without holding hands, doing whatever is comfortable. Because I'm not imaginative enough to come up with something new, I ask you all to have that imagination for me. Figure out a way that you are able to do the benediction, the well speaking, the speaking of what it's like to be in a community where you actually look at each other and are in connection with each other and care about each other, even if you have very strong differences.
Stand.
Stand, yeah.
Okay, just say go in peace.
Go in peace, yeah. Yeah, the people are kind of looking around. Okay. I don't know. I'm looking at that and see what they're thinking. And time for talking and conversation.
It's good.